New School. All right, welcome back to Noob School. John Sterling here, and I have a truly good friend. We've been friends for how long, Greg?
I did the math on this, 25 years.
25 years.
Yeah.
Wow. Okay, 25 years. Me and Mr. Greg Jackson have been friends. We've worked together. We've started projects together and sold stuff together and gotten in a little trouble together.
I don't remember that part.
Maybe we should have gotten in trouble. We got away with it. I don't know. But Greg is obviously an old friend, and Greg currently is the COO at Smart Sites, and he's based in Austin, Texas. And I remember when you went to Smart Sites to run it for a guy. I think I was the reference call. The guy called me.
That's right.
And
yeah.
I told him you would do a really good job for him, and you probably would find things for the company to do that he hadn't thought of yet because you got a good brain on you. But now you've successfully built it up. You've essentially brought in a partner or sold it to private equity.
That's right. Yeah.
And you're going to work there for some period of time.
Yeah.
So
we're moving into the next phase of kind of growth and acceleration. So
Yeah.
it's a challenging but a fun time just the same.
it's different, isn't it?
It is.
Yeah,
Yeah.
it's different. And you've been through that several times in your career. I think one of the things I've always admired about you, among many, is your ability to kind of roll with the punches. You know, this is happening. Okay, we'll just see how this works.
Yeah.
You know, we'll make this work this way. And I think a lot of other people, just in business and in life in general, you know, something happens and like, God, this is ridiculous, and you know, why is it happening to me? And it's not fair. And I'm going to sue these people. And I think you're a good example to people of just like, it's life. Move on. Might turn out to be a good thing.
Yeah. Well, thank you.
Yeah. It's awesome.
Yeah.
So you're doing that now, but what we like to do on this show is to back up and kind of learn more about you in your formative years and the kind of things, the experiences you had, education, et cetera,
Yep.
that led you to the point where you could do this job. And the reason I say it that way is many people, particularly in the noob school, that are just starting out, they think, I want to do what Greg's doing.
Sure.
I want to be COO of Smart Sites. It's like, well, do you know how to do that? You know, probably not. You know, you really don't want a job you don't know how to do.
Yeah.
So let's back up. I know you grew up in Canada.
That's right.
What part?
I grew up in a little town called Radium Hot Springs. It's in British Columbia.
Wow.
So it's about an hour from the Alberta-BC border.
Okay. Now, give us more information than that. Where is that, Alberta? all that
BC, so
stuff?
western part. The
western
So
part.
the Western Rockies. So it's the valley that divides the Rockies from the Purcells.
Okay.
And it's also the valley where the Columbia River starts.
Anywhere near the Calgary Stampede?
Yeah, it's like 3 hours from there.
Do you go to the rodeo over there?
Yeah.
Yeah?
Love it. It's fantastic.
All right.
So
I need to get up there. Check that out.
you do.
And you ski a lot up there, right?
You do.
Yeah.
Yeah. A couple great ski resorts. Heli skiing
Yeah.
is a big deal, right? If you can get up on some of the glaciers, so
Right.
it's a beautiful spot. So
And so you grew up there, and then was it a good high school you went to?
well, apparently,
Okay. Is that what you
It was
call
good,
Is that what
you
you
know.
call it in Canada as a high school, or
Yeah,
you call
do.
it something
Yeah,
else?
Yeah. So
And then college, where did you go?
University of Calgary.
In Calgary.
Yeah.
Okay. And what did you study?
I studied economics and political science.
Okay. So businessy stuff.
Yeah. I had no idea what I wanted to do.
Yeah. You kind of went general.
Yeah.
I did the same thing.
Yeah.
Someone I majored in political science. I promise you, I did not know what that term meant.
Yeah.
How would you know? Science and political.
Yeah.
I don't.
Yeah.
But they said, "Why did you take political science?" I'm like, it had the most electives.
But you know what's interesting now is when you think about like geopolitics, for example.
Yeah.
Like I'm a big fan of a guy named Peter Zion.
Yeah.
I don't know if you follow him, but he's written a couple of interesting books, and he talks about how geography and politics shape regions. They shape decisions, all these types of things. really timely in terms of what's going on in terms of the world. And I didn't, you don't necessarily get any exposure to anything like that in high school. And
Yeah.
then, when I was in university, I enjoyed those courses.
Yeah.
And it was one of those things where there's 2 or 3 professors that I had,
Yeah.
and I found that those were the ones that I was most engaged in.
Right.
And then on the business side, the economic side of it that's also, really fascinating to me in terms of, since I was a kid, I've always been fascinated how businesses grow and thrive and prosper and fall apart in some cases. And so I had a keen eye on those 2 things, and, worked out okay.
Yeah.
It ended up being a good foundation.
That's good. That's good. Yeah, that's good. I'm glad you enjoyed that geopolitical discussion. Probably, you probably got more of it in Canada than we got in the United States. we kind of think of all of our political discussions right here,
It's hard not to notice, right?
Yeah.
Like when you think of just the mass of the U.S.,
Yeah.
right, in terms of the size, number of people, all those types of things, and so you end up being a keen observer of things that are going on beside you, because there's a lot that is happening
Right.
that is incredibly impactful, from an economic standpoint, right? So those types of things. So
Right.
it's one of those things where. The U.S. is admired in so many ways, right? And over the years, there's things, there's tranches that things might not be going so great. But when you think about what's happened here in terms of the evolution of it and how it continues to grow and prosper and get better and make mistakes and learn from those things. As a Canadian, seeing that, it's impressive, right? Your
Yeah.
news channels are inundated with it, right? So it's you can't ignore it.
Yeah.
But I would say for me, that was an enticing thing, right? And now we're Jane and I are pretty much at the point now where we're going to have been in the U.S. longer than we've been in Canada.
Wow.
And so we're within a year or 2 of that, and so
Yeah.
that's pretty cool.
And you think you'll stay?
Yeah. Love it.
Yeah.
Love to go back and visit.
Go back and
right,
visit, but you're not
see
gonna
it,
move
see
back.
family and all that kind
Yeah.
of stuff. But from the places that we've been kind of privileged to live here for almost a decade, and then in Austin almost for 2 decades now. The people make it, obviously, right? It's been terrific for us, as we've raised our kids down here, and then also it's been great, from a professional development and a learning standpoint. So it's all good.
You like Austin?
I do.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I'll have to come visit.
It's hard not to.
Yeah,
There's
I'm
a lot
sure.
of good things going for it. It's young, it's vibrant.
Yeah.
I was commenting to a number of people over the last couple of days about when you go through down. We left Greenville almost 20 years ago now.
Yeah.
And you go to, when I first moved here, downtown was not that great a place to go. There's a few places down here, and now it's vibrant, it's full. There's people moving around. There's new buildings. There's new logos, and you can see why it's become a hub for
Yeah.
many people that want to come and
Yeah.
migrate to, which I think is that's neat to see those success stories, right?
Yeah.
And it, it begets more business, and
Yeah.
other things kind of grow and thrive, and it's, to me, that's fascinating to see those cycles.
Well, maybe you and Jay move back to Greenville one day. How about that?
Maybe.
That'd be good. Good for us. Okay, so you obviously went to a good college and you got a good basic understanding of geopolitics and also economics. And then how did you get started in the business world?
My first job was actually working for the university. So I got a job there, and it was, and that's what got me into the whole technology sector. And so it was, things were old manual processes, and it was doing some change management and systems implementation work on major, processes that needed to be automated. It made no sense to have, card systems and all
Yeah.
those types of things, and some disaster recovery stuff. And it was something I applied for. I needed a job when I was done, and I was fortunate enough to get it. And that kind of got me into being able to do, project management, and got me my toes in the water with respect to different technologies
So
and,
did
and
you-
how it gets applied.
Did you apply for that job while you were still in school?
Yeah.
Okay. Did you start before your school was out?
No.
Okay.
No.
So it was a full-time job?
Yep.
Okay. Interesting. And then how long did that last?
I think I was there for like 2 or 3 years.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then what happened?
And then I went to work for Fluor Daniel, the big engineering firm.
Okay.
Had a group of companies. They called them the diversified services companies, and so they were things that were complementary to their business.
Yeah.
And I had a number of college friends that actually worked for Fluor, and they said, "Hey, there's a sales job that's available with this group." It was called TRS at the time, and it was a staffing company.
Yeah.
And so their primary purpose, is you do large engineering projects, you staff up and you staff down. And they wanted to, and that was very cyclical. You either won the big project or you didn't. And
Yeah.
so they wanted to have, grow the business outside of Fluor. And so they hired me as a salesperson to go to the other, firms in town.
Yeah.
Then, so they had a database of, engineers and
Yeah.
computer scientists and drafts people and construction folks. And the job was to kind of use that portfolio of people and say, hey, if you need people for, short periods of time, or the project might be only for a year. And so as a salesperson, literally selling, bodies and expertise on a part-time basis. And so that got me into the Fluor universe of companies. And then,
You're about 25 then?
25, 28, kind of
Yeah.
in that range.
Okay.
And then they had this other company, and a good friend of mine, Peter Grace, you should have him on this show, great sales track record here. You've met him a number of times. He went and he was at Fluor in one group, and they had this idea to start do a similar type of thing, because they have large companies develop expertise. And so what I give the Fluor a lot of credit for is they had an incubator before they were known as incubators. And so they said, hey, we do a lot of procurement services, and so there's expertise that we have around buying stuff on a global basis. And there are systems that were put in place in terms of managing that process, right? So again, going from paper to computerization, which isn't really that long ago when you think about it. And they said, we're going to start this company, and it's going to be around procurement services and electronic procurement. And that happened to be in lovely Greenville, South Carolina.
Yeah.
So Peter went down. I had a lot of chats about this, and he was at that point in his life, and he's like, hey, I'm going to take a chance on this thing. And I'm like, I think that's great. And then 6 months later, he says, they need somebody else. What do you think? And so I came down, never been here before, and interviewed for the job. I think I was the 10th employee, that was coming onto this company, and loved the team. And then before I could leave, the president of the division at the time, he's like, so you're going to take this job? And he kind of, he was a good closer, John.
Yeah,
He was a lot
yeah,
like you.
yeah.
And so he put me on the spot, and I said yes. I was like, sure, I'm in. And then he literally turned around at his desk, and because the internal network, he knew that I was with his sister company and
Yeah.
stuff like that. And he goes, I'll tell your boss. So he sent him an email, and he says, hey, great job working with Greg on a number of things. We're excited to get him on his team. And that's, came down here. We didn't know if that was going to work, right,
Yeah.
in terms of a company or their concept, in terms of doing this. And so we got to start building an electronic procurement business.
So Fluor must have had a big presence up in Calgary? Okay.
Yep.
So
Yep,
some
exactly.
of your friends work there, you ended up going to work there.
Yep.
And then, you obviously did something in your sales job there to impress, Peter Grace and some other people.
Yep.
To think you're the guy they wanted to bring to do this.
Yeah.
Because there had to be thousands of other people, that work for the company.
There was, but I think there's something to, if it's a new thing,
Yeah.
because there's a concept, it's, hey, how do you bring a concept to reality? And there's a certain kind of headset where people, like entrepreneurs,
Yeah.
kind of love it, or they find that niche and they go do it.
Yeah.
But sometimes when you see it inside of this big, known quantity in terms of what you're doing, we didn't know it was going to work, right? It was a risk, right,
Yeah.
in terms of that. So a number of people were just,
No.
that turned them off, right? Even
No,
though they might have
I-
had a skill set and a resume that was much better than mine. But, I was keen on the technology.
Yeah.
I thought it was disruptive in terms of things that were going on. And as important as all those things is there's a team of people there that you could see, we're going to figure this stuff out.
Right.
And they had that confidence.
So what was
they
that
could
company
do that.
called, that division?
It's called Aquion.
Equion.
Yeah.
So Harbinger was another one.
Right.
But
So we ended up. So this was interesting
Okay.
because so we started this company. We started to get building electronic catalogs, which nobody had heard of at the time, and those types of things, and build a business to make the process better. And we steered it. We realized that the technology was more important than the services surrounding it. And so we built out that technology, and then the Fluor leadership team at the time, I give them a lot of credit. They're looking at these different businesses that they had under this umbrella. And they came to the conclusion with the president, a guy named Carl Falk, who was a good mentor of mine, and I'd learned a ton of things from. He, in conjunction with the Fluor leadership, said, "This isn't a good home for this technology. Let's sell it." And so let's spin it out and get it into a home where it makes a lot more sense. And the company that we ended up, or there's 2 or 3 different companies that we're in discussions with, and the company that we ended up, selling Equion to was Harbinger.
So, okay. So I think I always thought it was Harbinger, but I skipped one.
Yeah,
in my
that's how
mind.
I got to Harbinger.
And so Harbinger was invested in or partially owned by Fluor at that time.
No,
They sold the whole thing?
They sold the whole thing to
Okay.
them. And they were looking, they were an EDI company. And so they were looking to, hey, how do we have other value-added things that can consume traffic that we
Yeah.
make money on every transaction on, right?
Yeah.
In these private networks. So it made sense for them to have these other capabilities. So they took a chance on
Yeah.
that. And that's how, and I don't know the specifics if it came through Scott Millwood or not, because he was there at Harbinger for a period of
Yeah.
time. But that's how I got introduced to Alex and Courtney.
Okay.
And so we were looking at a joint venture of taking this capability and hooking it up to MP2 and the data
Yeah.
stream systems
Yeah.
to make that procurement piece better. And so I got to know Alex and
Yeah.
Courtney through a series of meetings, and so we explored, and Larry, and you briefly, not that much, you weren't that involved in that at that point. And we had a series of discussions. We were going down this path. We were going to say, hey, let's do this joint venture. We'll take this technology, we'll marry it up to these things, and those things are tricky, right, in terms of trying to figure out, hey, the right structure and those types of things. And I think mutually, both Larry and then the folks at Harbinger said, this probably isn't going to work. And I was disappointed because we had put in so much time and energy and effort to try to do it. And at the time, Jane had just taken a new job, and we were about to get married. And she took a new job in Toronto, and I'm like, well, I'll find something to do. I'll move back to Toronto, right? I'll go there's lots of stuff that I can figure out there.
Yeah.
And then, literally on a Thursday evening, Alex calls me up and he says, hey, do you want to have lunch tomorrow? And so we met downtown for lunch, and he said, it's unfortunate this happened, but why don't you come to Data Stream, and we're going to do it ourselves, and we need somebody to kind of help us get this thing off the ground. So that's how I met you.
Yeah.
So
Well, it's an interesting story for a number of reasons, but one is it shows, the noobs out there that are watching, you went through this process representing Harbinger, trying to get this partnership done, and for whatever reason, the plug got pulled on it.
yep,
But not because of you. You did a really good job. I'm sure you were all the people really liked you, and they thought, this guy can probably help us make this thing happen. So once again, I think it's taking what easily could have been a bad thing, made it a good thing.
yeah. Yeah.
So I think that's wonderful. You have a way of doing that. But I did wonder on the procurement thing, was there a company at the time that was able to do the procurement that we were trying so hard to do ourselves, the electronic procurement?
Yeah.
Was there somebody doing it?
There's two. There's a couple. The ones that come to mind are Commerce One and Ariba.
Okay.
Right, and they were both incubated and started in the Bay Area, and they were focused in a very different space. And actually, I remember you and I going out, and we were meeting with the Ariba leadership team, and we were seeing if we could do things together. And they're incredibly open about why they focused where they did.
Yeah.
And we thought, hey, we bring this industrial piece to the table,
Yeah.
and with it, it had a complexity that not others didn't necessarily appreciate in terms of the parts and all those types of things.
Yeah.
And they did office supplies and some routers and some computer products, and were able to scale that much quicker because it was easier. There's a more finite list of stuff that you could get into into an electronic catalog
Yeah.
and make money with. But I remember we had tremendous admiration in terms of what they were able to do and scale it. And then the trick for us was the fact that we were working with industrial distributors that were selling parts and pieces, and their whole commercial model was not supportive of e-commerce, right?
Right.
It was the antithesis of it.
Right.
Like it was like guy shows up, takes orders, checks the stock rooms. In some cases, if
Yeah.
they'd managed the stock room for it. We wanted to put that in electronic format and make the transactions
Yeah.
go away. So that window of time that we figured a lot of those things out. I kind of cherish that from a learning perspective, because there was a sales process in terms of trying to get people to adopt this technology, right? In terms of the first ones that are going to step into
Yeah.
the fray on this thing. And then equally as important of it is we had to bring the suppliers along, right? So we had to go and convince them that this big, thick catalog that they had, and these boatloads of people and trucks that would show up every day at the plant, that there could be some efficiencies gained there. And one of the things that I took away from that, and it gets to this notion of being a good lifelong learner and looking for ways to improve your organization. One of the really key things was when we went to the top industrial distributors at the time, we got meetings with the CEO
Yeah.
and the COO and the head of sales.
Fortune 500 companies.
And they,
Yeah.
so I look back on that now, and I think that's pretty cool that they gave us the time.
Yeah.
Right. But
Yeah.
at the same time, they were trying to figure out how's our business going to change.
Yeah.
And so the fact that we were able to kind of sell them on the concept, and then they had to make some pretty big strategic decisions
Yeah.
to be able to support this
Yeah.
and dedicate teams of people to it. And it was one of those things that wasn't a true startup. It was incubated inside of
Yeah.
what we did at DataStream, but it was phenomenal. I loved every single
was.
minute
It was
of it.
great.
It was a great learning experience.
Wonderful, wonderful. It was very difficult to do, and now the technology is different.
Yeah,
Wouldn't be as difficult today.
yeah. There's
Have chat.
inflection points there.
Have
so.
ChatGPT do it for you.
Yeah, it's true.
So after working with DataStream and iProcure in Greenville for a good chunk of time, how many years was it?
6 or 8 years, I think.
8 years.
Yep.
Did you get headhunted?
Yeah.
You got headhunted to go take over this company in Austin.
No, there's another step in there. So I went and worked with Ralph Carter at a company called Pavilion Technologies,
Pavilion.
which was a model-based control and optimization company that uses artificial neural networks, interestingly enough.
Yeah.
All the rage now, but that was awesome. So that was a company that was a venture-funded company and needed to get its footing around, hey, it's not just a cool technology, it's
Yeah.
the application of it in certain key industries. And that was I went there in a sales and business development capacity. And the goal essentially was to get that. The investors had been in it a long time, and the goal was Ralph built out a leadership team to kind of get it in a state that it could be sold and find a home for it. And then did that. So that was a fascinating process in terms of being able to kind of work through that. And so we ended up selling the company to Rockwell Automation. And Rockwell, I ended up staying on for about 5 years in terms of being the head of that division and running it and leading the sales team globally and getting to know the guts of an inside multi-billion-dollar company.
Yeah.
I certainly learned a lot of that. A
So
lot of other
Ralph,
things.
did Ralph move on
He
after
did.
you sold it and you took over and ran
Yep.
the division? I got you.
Yep.
Okay.
Yep. So that was fun, and then I left Rockwell, and I did a total. Somebody had recommended I talked to this company in Cleveland, Ohio, that was doing another type of control algorithm that they
Yeah.
were trying to license, and
Yeah.
and so we went and had it ended up being a couple years, so we raised a couple rounds of venture money, got a couple key customers on board that were starting to use it. Then, it ended up selling to one of the major deals that we put together. We got some investment money fund, so a good home for that. And,
Yeah.
and through the end of that process, I got a call from a headhunter, and or an executive recruiter, I guess is the
Yeah.
appropriate term. So I got a call from a headhunter, and he said, "I've talked to 3 people, and they all said that I should talk to you about this job." And so it was back in Austin,
Yeah.
and so we didn't necessarily want to be moving the kids all around the country all
Yeah.
the time, but we knew Austin well, and it was the right time and the right opportunity. So I got a chance to be the CEO of that company, and that's where you were my reference there, actually.
Yes,
And-
yes.
And so did that. So we, were able to grow that business. Really interesting niche product. So that company was called Win 911. And then through that, we were approached by, different firms along the way, and we ended up selling it to the Cap Street Group, which is a private equity firm in 2021. So that was an interesting process in terms of working through all of that, and then spent the last several years really working on, hey, how do we get this company, how do we accelerate growth? How do we build out additional capabilities around it so they're masters at that? And that's been a really both a challenging and a learning process for me in terms of getting it to the next state. And we made our first acquisition late last year.
Nice.
So that's the reporting and the analytics piece, and then we had the
Yeah.
notification piece. And so just earlier this month, we put we've been working for a year in terms of putting capabilities together that makes both of the products
One
better,
company, yeah.
higher value things that we can do.
Yeah.
So we're excited about how that's going to fit in the market, and through that process, we rebranded it under the banner of Smart Sites, and we've just been rolling that out.
Smart Sites.
So it's been it's probably longer and more information than you
No.
wanted, John, but that's the path, and it's been a series of kind of fortuitous opportunities that
Yeah.
took a chance on, and they worked out okay.
Yeah, it seems to me that, there's a lot of baseline work in your life, but that first big opportunity was moving to Greenville
Yeah,
and going after that, because that's a little scary.
yeah,
And from that experience, it led to the next one with DataStream, and then that actually led to the next one, because the next one was an old data streamer.
yep,
So
Yep.
kind of once it's kind of one of those things. If you're advising the people just starting out, once you kind of get in the game, you're in the game.
you're in it. Yeah,
And after a period of time, you were a number 2 guy, then you were a number 1 guy.
Yep.
Then you were number 1 guy, number 1 guy. You were
Yeah.
the guy.
yeah.
So it's very interesting. Now, the things you were working on seems to be either like electronic procurement or some type of AI, messaging alert kind of thing.
They've all been in the kind of, I'll call it the industrial software space. So
Industrial
around
something.
manufacturing, infrastructure, those types of
Connecting
things. Yeah.
something.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Is there more industrial stuff going on now or less?
No, there's more.
More.
I think there's a couple interesting things that are happening. One is kind of the reshoring of manufacturing. There's a lot of stuff that is just coming back. And then the other piece, it's a real challenge in the space, is automation.
Yeah.
Right? There's fewer people that are available that want to work in plants or. And so
Yeah.
you have to rely more and more and more on technology. And
Yeah.
so that's why I'm excited about what we're doing today in terms
Yeah.
of being able to say, hey, if there's fewer people, if something's going haywire, you got to know about it right away. And you got to arm that person right with the right information, right?
Right.
So it's kind of like, hey, there's an alarm that's going on this particular piece of
Yeah.
equipment. And then what we've been able to tie in with the company is called XL Reporter that we bought out of Boston. They have capabilities around industrial reporting and analytics, and so
Yeah.
they're crunching numbers in behind the scenes that's be able to say, okay, you might want to look at this, or here's a graph that shows what's happened in the last 30 minutes. So if somebody's got to go fix this piece of equipment, you got to arm them with, is it critical in terms of the nature of what I have to fix? What's kind of been going on, and what's the next step in the action? So that's what we've been able to
Okay.
build out, and it's exciting. And all the while, people have fewer people to be able to do this, and
Yeah.
so you got to do it in a complex environment in terms of multiple systems. So you got to make it easy to integrate into those things,
Yeah.
and then you got to make it really super easy for the operator or the maintenance person or whoever's responsible to go kind of fix that asset. And at the same time, the folks that are making some of the decisions around looking at the analytics, and the reporting pieces into plants, there's bits of data that you got to get from here,
Yeah.
here, and here, and we've been able to automate that with the reporting piece of it, and take work off of somebody trying to build a custom spreadsheet, do that for them, and then present it in such a way that says, hey, here it is.
Yeah.
Make a good decision, analyze it, drill in deeper as you need to. So it's fun.
Well, I love you mentioned that more onshoring of manufacturing and more manufacturing jobs. I love when the politicians say, we've got 30,000 shovel-ready jobs. I'm like, who wants to work with a shovel?
Yeah.
And what are they talking about?
Yeah.
Nobody wants to do that.
So it's interesting, like semiconductors is the one that gets a lot of headlines, right? When you look at, there's a ton of stuff that went to, China in particular and then Taiwan, but those whole efforts, and it's amazing when you think about what, Texas Instruments and Intel and these other firms, they're spending billions of dollars. Like Ohio's a good place, Columbus, Ohio. They've done a good job of recruitment in some of those firms. Austin's benefited from that in the surrounding area, Dell and.
So they're building new plants.
They are building new plants there. Samsung's there, and these things are massive, incredibly sophisticated in terms of the precision that has to happen. And all the while you still need a whole bunch of people, but you got to do it, as efficiently as possible.
Yeah.
And so that space, well, it doesn't necessarily sound that intriguing in terms of, there's other, hey, I want to go work on an app or whatever the case may be. There's real value there in terms of the stuff that we deliver. And if you're a lifelong learner and you like to understand how stuff's put together and how it works and how sophisticated it is, the blend of equipment and software is incredibly fascinating. And I'm excited about, some of, we need to look at some of the machine learning type things to be able to make it even better. It's just not just data or report, it's what other type of analysis can you apply to make this process more efficient or troubleshoot or whatever the case may be. So it's there's a lot going on in terms of the synthesis of those activities is pretty cool.
So your specialty has become helping industrial situations get better. The machinery talk to each other, to buy parts electronically, just to make everything work better within a factory or industrial setting, which is probably far more valuable than exchanging recipes on Instagram or something. But I don't know.
Yeah,
the marketplace hadn't caught up with that yet.
But it's interesting, and for the noobs, right? In terms of why would you want to go into this space? And I'd encourage people to go to a conference or go have a look. And there's something that will jump out at you, which is striking, and that's the age of the people in the industry. Right? There's a lot of white hair like you and I have, right? And those people are going away. And there's going to be opportunity, right? And it's not boring stuff. It's pretty fascinating in terms of what the impact that you can have, and that you get to sell real value, which is great.
Well, let's talk a little bit about sales in general. You have been in sales, but you've been more of a leader of salespeople. What would you say are some of the top traits of the best salespeople that you've worked with?
I think there's a number of things. One is just day in and day out attitude is incredibly important. Bringing a positive attitude to the table. I'd say another key one is a discipline and process, right? So that you have a plan, you want to execute that plan, and then you have to be a lifelong learner, right, in terms of these things. And you have to be willing to take risks. And I've been, that's, full credit to, the work that you've done and the things that I've been able to glean and observe you do in terms of building out sales teams, and more importantly, building out people to execute, right? Because you can't, everybody can't report to one guy as you get bigger. We were fortunate just a year ago this month, actually, to add Michael Pace to our team, right? And I called, we were at that stage, and we were talking with the board and the private equity folks, and we said we really need to build out a disciplined sales organization, and they're like, do you have anybody in mind? And I said, well, I have one person in particular in mind, and I don't know if we can get him. but he might have somebody that's coming along that might be stuck and
Yeah.
maybe something is not. So I called Michael and had a discussion with him and was picking his brains, and he says, well, tell me a little bit more. And I was like, well, so he said, give me some time to think about it. So we had 2 or 3 other conversations. I called him back and I said, Michael, you got a name for me? And he goes, what about me? And I said, well, I want you to understand 100% in terms of the state of where we're currently at,
Yeah.
and what we're working towards. And he said, okay, I'll come there. So he came on a weekend, and we literally sat in our back deck, and I had the big screen TV out, and I took him through the strategy and the plan, and kind of our strengths and our weaknesses. And
Yeah.
and he took a couple of days or a week or so, and he says, I think this could be good.
That's great.
And so when you talk about those characteristics
Yeah.
in terms of what makes a good sales
Yeah.
leader or a salesperson,
Yeah.
there's one guy that embodies
Got
them,
it all, yeah.
right? In terms of all of those things,
Yeah.
and on top of that, he's just a terrific person to work with,
Yeah.
right? So I've had the luxury of getting to see him come in and do these things.
That's good.
Really systematically, and it's what's awesome is the attitude that he brings to the table, and it's not a straight path, right?
Yeah.
Like you say, hey, we got to get this done, and then something pops up, and
Yeah.
it's and when you're a smaller organization and building out a team, there's a lot of stuff that isn't there,
Yeah.
and he just does it. Right,
Yeah.
you're better for it. You don't have to ask him. He just figures it out. He's solved 3 things that I hadn't even thought about, by the following Monday, and it's a pleasure,
Yeah.
right? In terms of that.
He's the best. He's the best. At one time, Greg, I think it was after you had gone, but we were trying to slim down our head count in sales because we were about to sell. So we're trying to, slim everything down. So I decided to move the managers into sales and just have less managers. So we had Pace was
Yep.
like the main guy
Yep.
working directly for me, and then 4 managers. So we got rid of 1 manager and split everybody up.
Yep.
Nothing changed. So we got rid of another manager, split everything up, nothing. We got rid of all of them. It was just Pace,
It was
and
Pace.
45 salespeople.
Yeah, that's a little much.
And he kept the number.
That's a testament to him. I don't know if that's a replicable
Didn't change my
model.
workload
Yeah,
any.
yeah.
He's great. And did you know that I sent him to Mexico when he was young?
Yeah.
Did you know that story?
Yeah.
I told him we had to have someone to move to Mexico, and he goes, "Why me?" Like, it said on your resume that you knew how to speak Spanish. He goes, "It was a minor."
So I remember that story, and I didn't know if he actually could speak Spanish.
No.
Well, he can, no. So, and
Oh, you
here's
mean
why.
now?
Yes.
Yeah, he can now.
So it was funny because we ended up having our first board meeting of the year down in Mexico.
Yeah.
We got an opportunity through Robert, who was the guy that hired me at Win 911.
Yeah.
He had some connections, and it's a great story. But we ended up doing our board meeting at Vicente Fox's presidential library.
Wow.
Never even knew this thing existed. And Robert
Yeah.
said, "Hey, we have an opportunity to go down there. Should we do it?"
Yeah.
And so they talked to their private equity partner and the key partner on the deal, and he says, "Yeah, sure, why not?"
Yeah.
And he talks to me, and I'm like, "Yeah, sure, why not?" We didn't know what we were getting into, so we go down there. This was in January, and then it was like, "Okay, would you like to have dinner with ex-President Fox and his wife?" And we're like, "Absolutely."
Yeah.
And he's 80 years old, she's 70. And so we ended up doing our board meeting in her conference room at this center that they built. And it's not like it is here. So it's said to be that, he had to raise all the money himself, and he's started this foundation. And he spent 2 to 3 hours with us over dinner. And, so we got a chance to pick his brain and hear his story. And if you want to read a book that is inspirational on all levels, read that.
Okay.
It's terrific.
What's it
in
called?
terms of I think it's just called the Vicente Fox story. It's like
Right.
my life, and he was in sales. He was running Coca-Cola, and he went back and what he did. So what was really neat was, so we spend these 3 or 4 hours, which was great, over dinner. And then he said, I'll come back tomorrow and I'll give you a tour of my library. And so he came back the next morning, and he took us through it, and he shared stories about, the different world leaders that he'd met at these different points.
Yeah.
And his thoughts on the current state of affairs and things that are going on. And he couldn't have been more humble, more terrific.
Yeah.
And then you look at what he's done, to get to where he is. And then he didn't just, pack up and leave. He actually said, there's other things that I can do in my private life, and he's been giving back in terms of the foundation that he's built and the things that he do. And so that's a long story that
Yeah.
is a bit of a tangent,
Yeah.
but back to Michael Pace knowing
Yeah.
Spanish, so
Yeah.
we go out for dinner, and they're giving us the instructions and all those types of things one evening. Well, sure enough, Michael's like, well, this is what he said, this is what he said, and then I see him talk Spanish, and I was like, oh, so he does actually know Spanish.
Yeah,
So,
yeah. He didn't when I sent him down there, but he certainly learned
Yeah.
over the course of a few years.
Yeah,
But
it was fun.
that was it's kind of like your move to Greenville from Canada when he was like 23, 24,
Yeah.
and just gotten married. And I'm
That's
like,
right,
I need you to
yeah.
move to Mexico.
Yeah.
And he's like, where? I'm like, you figure it out. I don't know. We need an office down there.
Yeah.
And he's like, all right, and I think that really put him in a different place in his career, to be in a foreign country.
It's
to
a
be
gutsy thing to do.
be a leader.
There's no infrastructure there.
Yeah.
You have to go figure it all out
Yeah.
himself, and that's
So-
not the easiest thing to do.
So again, another example like yours, where you take on something a little risky, a little different, a little far from home,
Yeah.
and it completely changes your nature for the rest of your career.
Yeah, what's that old saying? The only thing that really makes you change is when you're uncomfortable.
Yeah.
And there's some truth to that.
Yeah.
And sometimes when you take on additional responsibilities, can I do this? There's always going to be a certain amount of doubt that you
Right.
have in your head.
Yeah.
And if it's a little uncomfortable and a little awkward, that's probably a good thing because you're going to learn because
Yeah.
your sensitivities go up around stuff.
So what are the biggest mistakes you see salespeople make? The
Not
you've
doing
had-
their homework.
Not doing their homework.
Yeah.
Okay.
You get inundated with, I can increase your sales 50% or
Yeah.
90% or,
Yeah.
you get, if you have a discussion, and they clearly don't understand anything about your business.
Yeah.
Right. Like that's a big turnoff.
Yeah.
Right, in terms of that, because it takes effort and discipline and
Yeah.
and those types of things. But you can do some research. You can
Yeah,
find some
particularly
things
now.
out,
Particularly
especially now.
Jeez.
It's so transparent. So
Yeah.
that's probably the biggest one,
Yeah.
right? And then I would say the the talk listen ratio, right? I've one of the things that I've had the pleasure of all the trips that we went on together at different times, and your technique is unique because you ask a lot of questions, right? And you listen more, and then when it's time to actually come back and position something, you're a lot wiser in terms of how to do it, but it also shows interest in the company. And
Yeah.
and I've seen that work. When I was at Pavilion, I remember we did a series of meetings with some major European companies, and if you have a title, it's easier for the sales guy to get
Yeah.
meetings higher up. And so
Yeah.
we're meeting with VPs of manufacturing at major chemical and dairy companies around Europe. And the guy that was running our European operation at the time, he's like, okay, we're going to spend a week. We're going to do 2 meetings a day, and can you come over for this thing? And I'm like, yes. And so they get this series of meetings come up, and you have to have the agenda, right? And so my agenda was always the same, right? And it was like, hey, can you help us understand some of the key things that you're trying to accomplish, in the next year, right? Because big companies always have a plan and
Yeah.
certain initiatives and stuff like that. And about half of the cases that we went to, the response was, tell us what you have, or that type of.
Show us a demo.
So you do that, yeah, exactly. Yeah. Like it's not the easiest stuff to demo, but there's aspects to it, so it's more of a discussion. But
Yeah.
the other half, where it was really interesting, the response was that, and I learned this from you, is that ask them about their business. There's half of them that actually had a presentation for us. And so they said, okay, here's the things that are important over the
Yeah.
course of the next year to us.
Yeah.
And they were, in the industrial world, there's usually always something around safety. There's
Yeah.
always something around quality. There's
Yeah.
always something around efficiency. And in half of the cases, we got presented to,
Yeah.
and we never had to show a slide.
Yeah.
And those were my favorite, right? Those were
Yeah.
because you learned about the business.
Wonderful.
And some of them you'd hear from typically the VP of, technology or manufacturing, as a chemical engineer of some sort or some engineering background, very technical in nature, and also very candid.
Yeah.
Right, and they'd say to you, "This isn't what we expected. We expected you to tell us everything that you had." And the response is, "Look, we don't know if we can help you or not.
Yeah.
Right? We think you can.
Yeah.
We work with some of your competitors in certain cases, but are there things that you're doing?" And it draws to the surface. Do they have budget around certain initiatives? Right? Because if it's one of these other things that's over here, it might be a really good idea, might be a terrific ROI.
Yeah.
They might make a justification for it, but guess what? You got to run that through the budget gauntlet of what's going to get funded in a particular year. And so people that don't do their homework, right, and try to understand what some of those needs are, and the transparency today is huge. Like if you're selling into a Fortune 500 company, their initiatives are known. Go read the annual report. They'll tell you. How do you attach yourself to one of those things? Does it make sense, right? It's
Well, I
easy
mean,
enough to do.
just think about it. Again, just like you, I'm in charge of business, and people will try to get an appointment to come show me what they have.
Yeah.
Or come, show me how their stuff can help me or whatever. And so I'm just sitting here. I don't want to be shown anything. But they say, we'd like to come by and hear more about your business and find out if there's anything you're working on we could help you with.
Yeah.
Everything changes.
Yeah.
I'm like, I got a whole list of things. If anybody can take any of these things and do them, I'll swap you money for it.
Yeah.
I mean, all day long.
Yep.
But if you just
trade.
want to come let me look at your software,
Yeah.
so
Yeah.
that's a to me and you, that's an easy one. But I think salespeople, if they get trained the wrong way, they spend all their time learning everything about the product and how everything works, and they just can't wait to show somebody. Mm-hmm. Let me show you how our thing works. Like,
I think you need to be technically competent, though.
Yeah.
I'm a big believer in that. Because when you are selling something, if you know how your product works, you should take the time to invest in it. Should you be the first person to show it off? Not necessarily.
Yeah.
But I think in terms of building credibility and bringing value to the organization, you got to understand the business aspects of it, how it can be implemented, the potential impact.
I agree with you.
So-
Reluctantly, I agree with you. I wasn't particularly good at that, but I agree with you that that's ideal, is that you know how to put the customer first and let them talk.
Yep.
But you do understand the business application, the technical you understand everything. So when it comes up, you're prepared.
Yep.
But I have found, if I had to pick one or the other, and maybe you don't have to pick one or the other, but if I had to pick someone who was going to be all great with the product but didn't want to talk to the customer about what they need, or someone who's just as all about the customer and we'll figure out the details later, I would take the second guy. But I agree with you that ideally it should be both.
In those scenarios, I understand that. In those scenarios, I think the value of a really good sales engineer or technical salesperson, they're gold.
Right.
Right, in terms of being able to buddy them up.
Yeah.
And again, it depends on the complexity of your product.
Right.
But if you have a good sales engineer that loves the technology, has credibility, that's a team selling approach, and that's also very beneficial. It depends on what you're selling, but the other aspect of that oftentimes is you get an extra set of ears.
Yeah.
Right? And so you got somebody else that's listening for some subtle cues on. You might think, hey, this is the most important thing that we have to tell you about our product and its key capability, but there's this other capability that's over here that's actually what the customer needs.
Yeah.
And if you can flush that out of it, right, it makes it a heck of a lot easier
Right.
in terms of the justification.
Well, Greg, let me ask you a few quick hitters here. Because we could talk sales all day.
We could.
I think we're going to get to your favorite book later on the panel, aren't we? Was your favorite book the Bill Campbell book?
It's one of my favorites.
Okay.
It depends on the subject area. I love to read. I read a ton like you do.
Like hockey? We were talking about hockey, the great
A lot of the
Gretzky.
hockey stories are good, but
Tim
so
Horton.
can I comment on the book thing? So in business books, I love the book about Bill Campbell.
You did.
$1
Trillion Dollar Coach,
which is
yeah.
terrific.
We're going to talk about that one
Yeah,
later.
We'll talk about that one later. if there's other areas, I think there's a travel writer, a guy named Bill Bryson.
Yeah.
He wrote A Walk in the Woods, and they made that into a movie. But he's written other ones like In a Sunburned Country.
Yeah.
And he's laugh out loud funny.
Yeah.
Right, in terms of reading it, and he gives a slant to whether it's exploring Europe or Australia or
Or the
the
universe.
Appalachian Trail.
Yeah.
It's fantastic.
He came to Greenville.
Did you?
Spoke at the Peace Center. We
Did
went
you
and
go
saw
see him?
Yeah. And he was talking about his book about the universe.
Was he? Yeah.
And it's just, I can't believe one person can understand
Yeah.
so much. And,
Yeah.
But anyway, I agree with you on him.
Yeah.
Okay, favorite band.
See, that's tough.
You got to pick one, man. You can't be Canadian now. Are there any Canadian bands? I guess
Good ones.
Rush.
You got Drake. He's not a band.
Rush is good.
Rush is good. Trooper.
Trooper.
So I love bands that can perform.
Okay.
And so if you're limiting me to one, I would have to probably say U2.
You too. Okay. Well, you need to get out there and watch them in the Orb
Yes.
there in Vegas.
A friend of mine went the other night. He sent me a couple, just some snippet videos.
was great.
It looks just awesome.
Yeah. Favorite word.
Perspective.
Perspective. Tell me why.
One is I think I value different opinions on things and always have.
Yeah.
And I think whatever role that you have, that it's important to understand the different perspectives on stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And if you have a big problem that you need to solve, and everybody thinks the same way, it's usually the might be what the oddball opinion on something or perspective or some slant that you get that makes the discovery process that much
Gotcha.
richer.
So
for me, it's
you're always
perspective.
listening for different perspectives.
Yeah,
Like that.
yeah,
The opposite of the bubble. Everyone seems to be in these bubbles
yeah,
of
that's true.
understanding.
Yeah.
All right, now, is there anything that you want to promote today?
I want to promote this, right?
good,
I think
good.
the fact that, when I think about the accomplishments that you had and the things that you did to build a sales organization, and then the people that have gone on to lead other sales organizations or what they've done, the genesis of that is really incredible, and
Thank you.
I think you should be very proud of that. I'm a huge beneficiary of
Yeah.
the opportunity to work with you and others around you.
Well, thank you.
And so I think if I was to say promote something, it's, hey, make sure you stay connected to people, right? Because it's meaningful and
Yeah.
it makes a difference, and you get another perspective.
Right.
And I think that's valuable as you got to learn and grow. And so the opportunity to work with others and gain from them,
Yeah.
I think that's pretty incredible.
Well, thank you, and I appreciate that. I really do. And people say that from time to time, which I appreciate. But the message for the people, the noobs and the business owners that watch this show, is that wasn't because I was some kind of magic person. Like I'm going to magically turn these people into great leaders. It was a careful selection process. We were very careful about what we were looking for. What their personality profiles were, what they did in college, were they leaders?
Yep.
How did we feel about them? What was the look and feel? What kind of experience they had? So we did, we would do, 100 interviews, to pick 4 people.
Yep.
And then those 4 people, eventually that became over 100 people in the sales department, but they were all carefully selected. So, when we picked up Michael Pace, we knew he was going to be a winner. There's no question about it.
Yeah.
Todd Lorbach, Dustin Caudell, go down the list.
Yep.
Greg Jackson.
Yep.
So anyway, that's part of my business now, is helping business owners figure that out. What I figured out with help is if you take the time to get the right people up front,
Yeah.
you're not going to be stuck with a sales force that's driving you crazy,
Yeah.
like trying to get them to do things they're not going to do. So you got to get the right people. So
Yeah.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah. All right. Well, thank you very much, Mr. Greg. We will we'll conclude, and hopefully next time you're here from Austin, we'll do a follow-up.
That would be terrific.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank
Thanks,
you, man.
John.
Take care. All right.